Free Frank and Free Lucy came to Illinois in 1830, bringing with them four of their 7 children. Their son Solomon and eldest daughters Judah and Sarah remained in bondage in Kentucky. Solomon's freedom was purchased in 1835. Free Frank platted New Philadelphia the following year in hopes that the sale of lots would fund the purchase of his daughter's freedom. By this time, Judah and Sarah had children of their own, and they too lived in slavery. You were standing in the oldest part of the town. To the west was the home and workshop of Spalding Burdick, one of the first residents. He was a shoemaker from Rhode Island who lived here with his second wife, Anne Hadsell, and their children. In 1850, Burdick was one of at least 5 men in the township who made and mended shoes. He was raised in an era when many New England farmers supplemented their incomes by making shoes. While residing in New Philadelphia, he farmed 40 acres and kept horses, milk cows, pigs, and beef. John Bixler was an early resident. While living in Kentucky in 1824, Bixler freed his slave Kezia Clark and her 1-year-old daughter Louisa. Bixler and Clark left Kentucky, settling in Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri, before coming to New Philadelphia in the early 1840s. Bixler and Clark each purchased one lot in New Philadelphia, and Clark also owned an 80-acre farm east of town. Bixler's home was between where you are standing and the cabins to the east. Settlement of New Philadelphia accelerated in the late 1840s. One promising new settler was Reverend Christopher Sanborn Luce. Like Spalding Burdick, Luce was a Yankee shoemaker, but he was also a Free Will Baptist preacher and taught school. Free Frank contracted with Luce to build a seminary that would also serve as a church. Luce and McWhorter built a schoolhouse, and Luce became the first postmaster. But when he failed to build the seminary, the 2 men sued each other, and Luce left town. New Philadelphia never had a church building, so services continued to be held in the schoolhouse. You are in the approximate center of Block 8. This was the hub of the community in the mid-19th century. Reverend Luce lived here and kept the post office. The schoolhouse that Reverend Luce and Free Frank built served the town until 1874, when a new building was erected northeast of town. By the 20th century, Block 8 was devoid of buildings and was known as the Park. You are facing Main Street and looking south towards Block 13, where Louisa Clark McWhorter's house stood. The daughter of Kezia Clark, Louisa married Free Frank McWhorter's son Squire in 1843. Louisa and Squire built this house about 1847 and lived here with their 4 children until Squire's death in 1855. Louisa, her children, and her mother moved to Quincy for several years, during which time the house disappeared from the tax rolls. Archaeologists digging to the lowest level below the house discovered a layer of ash, suggesting the house burned in the late 1850s. Louisa returned to New Philadelphia after the Civil War and rebuilt her home, the most highly valued tax property and probably the only 2-story structure. Louisa McWhorter's house was the most imposing building in New Philadelphia. When Louisa McWhorter died in 1883, she was the owner of 2 farms and 17 lots in New Philadelphia. Before turning on to Ann Street, Take a moment to survey the rolling landscape. Most of the blocks before you were never developed. Possibly they were too low and swampy. To the southeast, across the fields and nestled in the woods, is the McWhorter family cemetery. Here lie Free Frank and Free Lucy McWhorter and all of their children, Judah, Sarah, young Frank, Solomon, Squire, Commodore, and Lucy Ann. The cemetery is not open to the public, as it is only accessible through private property.